Hey, so I want to talk about an amazing book I read called Roadside Picnic. It was written in the 70s by two brothers, Arkady and Boris Stulgatsky. It is an absolutely phenomenal book that really makes you think, which I think the best science fiction makes you look at your real world and question what is happening around you. In Roadside Picnic, we follow a man named Red Shoehart, who he is what is called in the world of the story a stalker. To get into what stalkers do, we need to go into the history of the world. And I think that's also a great thing about this book is that it feels very organic, the way the world is. What happens? A couple years prior to the beginning of the book, an event happens, and it is called The Visit. Capital letters, capital T, capital V. That is how it's written in the book, at least in English. And what happens in The Visit is aliens visit Earth. Not for very long, if I remember correctly, a handful of hours. Not even a day. Super short amount of time. They visit in 6 different spots around the world, and these places are called zones. So what happens in these zones is that because they've been touched by alien life, is that they have all this weird alien technology, and they have all these weird phenomena that happen. There are spots that are colloquially known in the world of the story as bug traps, which are spots where gravity does not work as it should. There is more gravity than there should be, which is weird. And I really love the way they introduce this because it's just one of the fantastic ways this book is written is how organically everything is introduced in the world and how well done the exposition is. Okay, they kind of tend to do the lecture thing, but it is explained why in the world of the book. So it does follow a logic of a conversation you would have. They also have a great moment. So with bug traps, the way they introduce it is Red enters the zone. A stalker is someone who illegally enters the zone so as to smuggle alien artifacts out. Red Shoehart is one of these people, and that is how he earns money. At the beginning of the book, he's a young man in his early 20s, I think, who, that's just the way he makes money. I think he is also a lab assistant, but that doesn't make a lot of money. So to make some serious cash, he does a couple of legal things on the side. It is admitted to be a very dangerous job. At the very beginning of the book, Red Shoehart enters with 2 friends of his. One friend really wants to get this specific object and is like, Red, please help me. You are the stalker here. And he's like, okay, if another friend comes with you. I know you, I don't trust you that much to go in alone. So they go as a trio. You get a really good example of seeing Red's expertise, especially when it is juxtaposed by these people who it's their first time in the zone. And in this bit, you get great bits of, not really exposition, but world building, where Red uses bolts and nuts and just starts, he gets this feeling, you know when you're in a place a lot and you really know it, and so you know when something's wrong with it? That is what Red has with the zone. So he just throws a bolt, a nut in the air. And then you see that it is a place where the gravity is acting weird. And that is how we get this sort of introduction into the world, and that this place is weird, and the rules of Earth are not the rules of this place. One of his friends dies as a result of this, and Red is subsequently kind of haunted with it, feeling the guilt of his friend's death, thinking he could have done something different. As the book goes on, we see Red grow as a person. He gets older, he gets married to his girlfriend when he learns she's pregnant. They have a child together. His child, because he's a stalker and he enters the zone so frequently, his child is mutated. And it's referenced in the book that this is a known problem. And his girlfriend, when she's still his girlfriend and tells him she's pregnant, even says, I want to keep the child despite it being a stalker's child, and I know it will come out mutated. It's a known problem in the world of the book. And that brings me to another interesting point. So, this story does not take place in the USSR. The story takes place... Actually, I don't ever think it's mentioned in the book where the story takes place. And I think it's supposed to be England. It doesn't take place in Russia, and this kind of reminds me of a trick Shakespeare used to do. Shakespeare had a lot of critiques for the government of his day. The thing is, he lived in a government that you couldn't critique. The Queen had spies everywhere. She would take care of you if you critiqued her publicly. So what Shakespeare did was he worked around this by not critiquing her, by critiquing different monarchies in different places, but using them as a stand-in for the British monarch. He would never openly critique his government. He would set his plays in other places and critique those governments. That's completely okay. So I think that's also what Arkady and Boris did. Their story is not set in the USSR, because the USSR of their day, you could not critique publicly. So when he shows a government that isn't fully competent and has a lot of problems with it, it's a different government, a fictional place. The Russian government in the story, because of course there's a zone in Russia, is it's also interesting because the zone there doesn't have stalkers, because the military force around the zone is just so harsh that no one can get in alive. And I think it's also a critique about Russia not sharing the truth with its citizens. The greatness of this book is, when you read it, you are completely in the story. You are feeling for Red. You want him to have the best outcome possible. I think looking at this book and looking at it through the lens of two men who lived in the USSR is really interesting, and you get an extremely interesting look. It's a story that so subtly says its point that no one can censor it. And now I kind of want to get to the end, and well, the middle end. So as the story goes on, Red Shoeheart has his child, who she is a young girl named Monkey. That's because she looks like a monkey. Aforementioned mutations of the children of stalkers. At first, she's a very happy child, and she has a pretty nice childhood, and he is trying to go less into the zone. On the other hand, he has a family. It's expensive, so he does occasionally have to go into the zone. One time he gets caught trying to sell goods on the black market and gets sent to prison. When he comes out, the world is a completely different place. For technology from the zone to replace engines and cars. And on the other hand, it's also doing more bad. At first, they were trying to get people to emigrate away from towns next to these zones. And now they're trying to get people to stay, because they realize that when people move away from the zones, bad things happen in the places they move to. Crime rates go up, death rates grow up. Zones are becoming more and more unstable at some times. They've become almost empty of all they had to give. They've been plundered, and everything they had to offer was taken from them. On the other hand, they're also bringing corpses back to life. It's a weird thing. Red Shoeheart's father comes back to life. Like, it's not fully alive, it's kind of a zombie situation, but like, they're not mean or anything. They're not like evil. They don't want to eat your brains or something like zombies you usually do in fiction. They just kind of want to go home, to the home that they lived in. And they describe stories of people, of bodies, waking up, climbing out of their graves, and going back to their old houses, only for these places to have different families in them. And these families to become terrified and think, holy shit, what the fuck is happening? And then we have the fact of Red's daughter, Monkey. When we last saw her, before Red went to prison, she was a happy, bubbly young girl. She is no longer that. She is now quiet and solemn and never speaks. This is a side effect of her mutation, and that there is a fear that this just means she is losing all that is human to her, that she will never be able to speak again. Due to several factors, his daughter being ill, them having less money because suddenly there's nothing to steal from the zone, and Red was in prison for years. Red listens to an old friend of his called the Vulture. He's called the Vulture because when he went into the zone, he would go in with someone and always leave alone. And so people gave him the nickname a Vulture. And Red, against his better judgment, takes the opportunity the Vulture offers him. The Vulture claims to know the whereabouts of a mythical object that can grant wishes. So the Vulture offers Red to go in with his son. Red takes this offer. Red goes into the zone with the Vulture's son. And in there we learn that this mythical object does exist, but it has a catch. Someone has to be sacrificed for you to use it. And it's interesting because you kind of see Red get to this conclusion. Like, he realizes it as time goes on in his journey with the Vulture's son, that the reason the Vulture sent him with his son is like, hey, here's my kid, use him as the sacrifice, which is like kind of horrible and kind of really shows you what kind of person the Vulture is. And so now we get to the last scene of the book. The Vulture's son doesn't know that you need a sacrifice, and he thinks just anyone gets a wish. And he runs up to the object and is yelling, "Happiness for everyone, free, and no one will go unsatisfied." Red thinks, what a foolish child. That is his wish. That's what comes to his mind first. The boy dies, and Red is sitting there with this existential crisis of what is he going to wish for? And he is freaking out, trying to figure out what does he want. He's thinking about the monkey, he's thinking about his wife, he's thinking about his friends, he's thinking about the friend who died at the beginning of the novel, and at the end goes up to the object and yells, "Happiness for everyone, free, and no one will go unsatisfied." And with that ends the book. I love it how at one point he is critiquing this young boy for his naivete and saying, how foolish are you for thinking that is your wish. And it's like saying peace forever. It kind of is a culmination of all these horrible things that have happened to Red across his life. He contemplates wishing for the zones to disappear. In the end, this is what he wishes for. Happiness for everyone, free, and no one will go away unsatisfied. That's the story of the book, with lots of caveats and sidetracks because I'm ADHD as fuck. Thank you for watching. I hope you guys read the book and enjoy it as much as I do. It is truly a fantastic novel. Goodbye!